that we are trying to live our lives as in the incarnation of God in this nation. The best example I can think of is what happened when the Russian monks from Balaam went to Alaska. I have a very deep place in my heart for Native Americans. I grew up in northern Idaho, and I remember how in high school we were studying in civics class about all the racism that was going on in the South against black people, and how horrible that was. And yet I remember one time I was sitting in the Pastime Cafe in the summertime with some friends, and we were having health drinks. We were having Coca-Cola and some sweet thing, I think, sugar buns or something. And all of a sudden, two big, huge school buses pull up. And out come a bunch of firefighters. And they're all Native American. And they've been fighting forest fires in the region. And I remember my shock that one of the waitresses and the manager rushed forward to the door and said, "You can't come in here." They were saving our forests, but they couldn't come in. And, allegedly that was because they smelled a fire of smoke. But the reality was, my friends and I knew, is that they were natives. And in northern Idaho at that time, we didn't have any natives in my high school. They lived on reservations, and they were separate from us. They were below us in stature. And that was the truth. And I remember thinking, this is horrible. This is racism. So here we are having classes about racism in the South, and we're surrounded by racism in our own community by excluding the natives. And it was just disgusting to me. And it's something that I learned when I was an undergraduate, that if you are sitting there silently when your friends are telling racist jokes or sexist jokes, you're guilty if you say nothing. If you don't say, I'm disgusted by this conversation and I want it to come to an end or I'm walking out, you're guilty of racism. If you're hearing women in your men's gathering, your little men's clique, around a beer stein, being demeaned by and being objectified, and you say nothing, you're guilty of sexism. You are essentially slandering your sisters and your mother and your grandmother. I mean, this is serious business. We have to take our faith seriously in all aspects of our life if we are going to restore the image of God that has been shoved out. And I agree with Father that that I've been preaching the same thing and been writing about it, about how we're witnessing a genocide of Christians in the Middle East that we've never seen in history of the likes of this. And then we have a government that has been in denial and refusing to speak out. I have been, in my articles on Islam, which I've posted numerous times, I finally promised my community that I would not do any more when I have a long-distance trip planned. Because the last time when I was at St. Barnabas Church in Costa Mesa, California, a great big Antiochian church, it's known as the hipster church. Because the median age there is 36, and there are more beards and tattoos in that one little spot of the world that I've ever seen before. And while I was there, 7 women were pregnant, and there was just so many kids everywhere. It was just a thriving parish. And the number of men and women with tattoos and nose rings and all of the other things probably beats any other Orthodox parish, all because one man who was known as sort of the king of the tattoo artists converted to Orthodoxy and now wants to be a priest, and he's there. And one of the young men that is one of my spiritual sons from Spokane is a tattoo artist. And the first time that he came to visit the monastery to be part of the brotherhood, the encampment that we had when we had our first retreat for the Salish Brotherhood of St. John the Wonder Worker, and I'd heard about him. And I'd heard about how he and his wife had been mistreated when they went to a parish in another town, an Orthodox parish, and how all of these people in the parish sort of gathered their kids and pulled them aside away from this family that walked in that were covered with tattoos. You know, Shane has a tattoo on his neck here and lots here, and so does his wife. And she was so devastated, she said, "Honey, I want to get out of here." And so they went there to venerate the Merstreaming icon of Hawaii. They didn't even get to see it. They felt they had to leave because it was so shameful the way they were treated. So anyway, back to St. Barnabas. When I arrived, I was a guest in the home of Kevin Allen from Ancient Faith and his wife. And in the evening, as we were sitting in their home drinking scotch, that first night, I mentioned that I had some regret because I had just written an article on Islam. And I'm not one of those that believes that we worship the same God. I'm sorry, we don't. And I'm not one that believes that the Quran is a holy book. It's not. Anybody that has read the Quran, which I have twice, sees that the Trinity, the doctrine of the Trinity, is hatefully maligned. The doctrine of Christ incarnate, the Logos incarnate, is maligned, and it's not. We are not treated as equals in the Quran. Period. And the last chapter of the Quran was the most violent chapter because that was the most violent time in the life of their prophet, because that's when he had amassed his army to take down Constantinople and the Christian world. And when you look at the Coptic people, the word Coptic means Egypt. It's the ancient word for Egypt. And all of Egypt was Orthodox. It was all Christian. And now it's less than 10%, and they are persecuted. Well, most of the people are not Arabic. Most of the people, their roots are Coptic, but they were forced into Islam by the sword or by economic embargo, essentially. And so anyway, I had written an article about that. And just before I left, I got another email threatening to behead me. So here I am in Costa Mesa after the big shooting that happened just south of there. And I told Kevin, I said, I'm really regretting the fact that my article was posted. And then I stupidly, at the end of the article, I said, I'm looking forward to meeting all my friends in Costa Mesa this weekend. I said, what do you think? And he says, I think this is not good. So that evening, he called the chief of the Costa Mesa Police Department, and he told them, he said, we have a police chaplain here, and our rector, Father Wayne, is a police chaplain for your department, and here's what's happened, and what do you think? And the chief said, I think we better protect your parish. So for the very first time on one of my speaking tours, I had an undercover police officer with me at all times, and they had 3 police officers, 3 or 4 in the parking lot undercover, and they had 2 patrol cars driving through the area on a regular hourly basis, and they had 1 sheriff's deputy and 2 police officers and a Coptic man with a beard who was a FBI agent, all of them Orthodox and members of that parish, were in the parish armed. That's where we have come. I remember once when I wrote, I had a headline on one of my blogs, and it just simply said, Bible versus Quran. And I had a quote from the Bible and a quote from the Quran. And one was a charge from our Lord to love our enemies, and the other one was to slaughter them. And that's all I did. I didn't write an article. I just posted those 2 things. And 2 days later, or a day later, I got an email through Facebook, but the private part of Facebook, from a man in Turkey, telling me that I had no right to quote from the Quran, and then he said, we behead people like you. And then the following week, I went to SeaTac Airport in Seattle to pick up our father Moses, who was returning from a trip to Greece. He'd been on Mount Athos for 3 weeks. And as I went to the cell phone parking lot, they have a new one now that's bigger and well lit, but this one was dark. And I opened up my laptop, and I had the glow of the MacBook Air in my face, and I had the overhead light on, and I was working. And all of a sudden I thought, I can't see anyone around me. I see cars with parking lights moving in and out. Maybe this isn't the best place to be doing this. So I closed up my laptop, and I drove to the nearby town of Berrien. And I went to this great big parking lot that serves multiple big box type stores. And I parked in the very center, looked all around. There was nobody, no cars, nothing. It was a hot summer evening. Father was due to land at SeaTac at 12 midnight. So I had my window down, the dome light on, my laptop open, and I was working with my hotspot on my phone. And all of a sudden, there's a man standing at my window. And I can't see his face because it's up here, but I saw his figure, and judging from his figure and his voice, I would say he was probably about 28. And he said, "Are you from Vashon Island?" And I just about jumped out of my skin. And I said, "Yes." And he said, "You don't have the right to quote from the Quran. We behead people like you." And then he disappeared. And the only thing I can think of is that, that he had a search engine, and he found my blog article that had the word Quran. And the fact that he said what he did, it might even been that he saw me on Facebook, because his words were so similar to the man in Turkey. And I thought, I've got to be careful, because it's not about me, it's about my community. And what if they come after my community? And so I didn't say anything to Father Moses when I picked him up, and we went to the dock waiting for the ferry, and I got home, and I was praying all the time, "Oh God, please protect the monastery." And I got there, and everybody was fine. But the next day, when I talked to the community about what had happened, they're saying, "Please, it's one thing if you're going to seek martyrdom for yourself, but don't bring it down on us." And it's true. I mean, I've always thought, ever since I was a kid, that there's two ways I'd like to go. My preference is I want to be standing in the high place at the end of the Paschal liturgy, the very end. Everybody has already kissed the hand cross and everybody is going into Trapeza. And then they say, "Where's Father Tryphon?" And they come back and they find me serenely dead at the high place chair with a smile on my face. My second way to go was the way a Coptic bishop that I saw a video of, who was standing in front of the holy table. He had just finished the divine liturgy, and the Copts had this tradition, kind of like us when we turn with the gifts at the very end. Well, he lifts up the remainder of the gifts, and at the very moment the gifts, it appeared like they were removed from him and set on the holy table. Some Coptic people say that an angel removed the gifts, but he collapsed in front of the holy table dead. Don't revive me if that happens. That's my one chance to get into paradise. That would be a good thing. That would be a great thing in my biography. Oh, by the way, he died at the conclusion of the divine liturgy, right before the holy table. I mean, let me think of that. That would be good. But I love my community. And we've worked hard to build that monastery. And I don't want to see somebody come in there because of something that I have said. So now I'm far more judicious. And I've pretty much said what I need to say. But at the same token, I'm not going to remain silent if there's another round of slaughter of my brother Christians and my brothers and sisters in Christ, in other parts of the world. I saw a little thing on the news this morning online of Pope Francis washing the feet of Muslims and saying we all worship the same God. And on one hand, I really appreciate Pope Francis and his simplicity, and I think he's given we Orthodox something to be imitating. But on the other hand, I've had it to hear with this political correctness that somehow we are all worshiping the same God, and we're not. We're not. Doesn't mean I don't love them. It doesn't mean that I'm not called to forgive them. It doesn't mean that I'm not called to treat them as my brothers and sisters, because we are the same people, really. And they're misguided. And I feel sorry for people that think that blowing themselves up makes them martyrs, and that they're going to be, enjoying, their life, their eternal life with all these virgins and boys. That's all in the Quran. I mean, I think that's what a terrible thing. But the only thing we can do with people like that is to love them. I have a Coptic priest friend in San Diego who had this experience before he moved his family to San Diego from Cairo. It was during a time when the Islamic Brotherhood was doing heavy-duty persecution of the Coptic people, and their churches were being burned en masse, and it was very bad for them. And it got to the point when they were so low on food that he had to go out. And for a Coptic priest to be seen on the street during that time, during any time, it can be bad, but during that time particularly. So he remembered there was a grocery store that he hadn't been into, a fairly good-sized grocery store that wasn't too far from his parish, from his rectory. So he got into his car and he quickly drove, and he went into this grocery store. And when he got inside the door, he realized, much to his chagrin, that the place was owned by the most extreme form of Islam. The people that were working there all had white hats and were wearing white robes, which is the sign of this extremist group. And he thought, oh my gosh. So he grabbed a loaf of bread and headed to the checkout stand. And the proprietor of the place was the one that was checking him out. And he says, oh no, you need more. No, I don't have, this is all I need. I don't have any time. Oh, but you need to have more groceries. And oh, let me show you our warehouse. And the priest said, I don't have time, I'm late, I really don't have time. And the man, I insist you have to see our warehouse. And so here he is in a whole store filled with people dressed the same way. Bearded men with white hats and white robes. And he told me, he says, I just knew this was my end. So they took him, the man took him to a door, and he opened the door, and it was a basement. And he says, come on down here, come on down here. And by then there were others with him. And so this priest just said, I had to prepare for martyrdom.